something went terribly wrong. Filming weddings is hard, like really hard. I didn't know that. For a while there, I was filming the ceiling. This is the story of how I broke the gimbal at the first wedding I ever filmed. My name is Hannah Thomas, and this is my filmmaking horror story. So I'm about to tell you the story of how I ended up capturing incredibly horrible footage during the most important part, the wedding ceremony. In this video, I'm also going to give you 3 tips on how to prevent this from happening to you at your first wedding. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you how the final wedding video turned out. Spoiler alert, you can't tell that I broke the gimbal at all. First off, if you don't know what a gimbal is, it's a piece of equipment used in filmmaking. It helps you get those smooth and nice and stable shots. Let me be maybe the first person to tell you that learning how to use a gimbal is no easy task. Yes, gimbals are incredibly versatile and user-friendly, but they take tons and tons of practice. The part that I personally struggled with the most was the balancing. When you're first learning how to balance, it may take you hours to get the thing balanced the first time. Then you'll have to do it again and again multiple times before you can do it confidently and quickly. Now there are a plethora of different variables that will determine your own personal experience with the stabilizer. Comment down below if you have your own horror stories, or even if you found it incredibly easy to use. My experience is probably entirely different than your own, so please don't let this shy you away from purchasing or starting to use the DJI Ronin SC Pro, which is the gimbal that I use and I absolutely love, because it is a beast once you learn how to use it. Just be sure, no matter what setup you're working with, what camera, what gimbal, what stabilizer, whatever, to practice, practice, practice before filming your first ever wedding. So that's my first tip on how to prevent this from happening to you. To practice like crazy. Just go out and film every single thing you can think of. Now this wasn't the first time I ever used the DJI Ronin SC. I absolutely 100% do not suggest to use a stabilizer for the first time filming a wedding, especially your first wedding. Don't do that. So this wasn't my first time using the stabilizer, but this was my first wedding. Creating professional wedding videography takes loads of experience and confidence and filmmaking knowledge. To say it frankly, filming weddings is hard, like really hard. Honestly, it's impossible to be fully ready for your first wedding because there's just so much that's always happening. Listen, there are moments that will happen and then will never ever happen again. So if something's going wrong with your film equipment at this certain moment during the wedding, it's very likely that you're gonna miss something. That's scary. That's really scary. That's just a filmmaking horror story in the making. On my Instagram story a while ago, follow me on Instagram at Future Filmmakers. If you don't, I posted a poll asking people which is harder, filming a wedding or filming a short film. 48% of you said weddings, and 52% of you said short films. So it was really close. It's pretty much a toss-up. But in my opinion, for the newbie filmmaker, I think it's harder to film weddings just because there are no reshoots. If you mess up something in a short film, forget to press record, your camera dies, etc., more often than not, you can just reshoot that later. But in weddings, if something terribly goes wrong, you miss it. And that's exactly what happened to me. Something went terribly wrong. So here's exactly what happened so you can prevent it from happening to you. I did in fact balance the gimbal perfectly, but there was a slight issue. Every time I tilted the gimbal at a certain angle, the top of my camera, the Canon M50, would hit the back of the gimbal. So while the bride was walking down the aisle, my camera was hitting the back of the DJI Ronin SC, putting stress on the motors. And if you know anything about DJI Ronin, whenever this happens, the gimbal starts beeping. So here I am, standing in the middle of a wedding with a beeping gimbal. I absolutely panicked. And what I did is I immediately shut it down. Not worth it, not gonna disrupt this magical moment, turn it off. So instead of filming the wedding, for a while there, I was filming the ceiling. ended up holding the camera on the gimbal, trying my best to hold it still, but as you can see, I was not the best at that at all. So my tip number one was to practice, practice, practice. So hopefully this would prevent this from ever even happening to you, right? If I had practiced with the gimbal enough, I would have realized that this would be a possible issue and I would have never balanced it in a way that it would be bumping, right? My tip number two is to have a backup cam at the wedding, filming in the back. So if anything goes wrong with your A cam, you have a backup. And I did have a backup cam set up at back exactly how I'm suggesting to you, but I was borrowing it from a friend. So I had never used it before and I knew nothing about it. And did you know there are older Canon cameras that will only record 4 gigabytes of HD video before shutting off? I didn't know that. Guess what? She had an older Canon camera that filmed 11 minutes before the ceremony even started. So my advice is, if you're borrowing a camera, please just shoot something before going. Shoot something long enough as a wedding. See if the camera will film longer than 30 minutes straight, because you're probably gonna have to leave it unattended during the wedding and you're not gonna be able to check it because you're worried about the A cam. So it's best to do that before going. And if you don't have time because you didn't plan things right, just do a quick Google search. The information's all there for you. I'm sure you can find it based on the model of camera that you're working with. And if you do work with an older Canon camera as a B cam, you can just switch down to SD. I know it's not gonna look as good, but trust me, it's better than nothing. That's what I had to do for my second wedding, because we can't all afford to film with the nicest, fanciest equipment when we're just getting started. I promise you, they're not paying for that 4K when you're just starting out, so it's okay. After the ceremony was over, I tried rebalancing the gimbal on site, but I was no expert at balancing at this time. And like I said earlier, weddings are extremely hard and stressful, so I was extremely stressed out because there were tons of moments that were going on while I was trying to rebalance, and I was missing them. So I was unable to get the camera on the stabilizer because I eventually just gave up, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go film what's happening right now that I'm missing. So I ended up going handheld. And there are a few things that I'm just going to go over with you quickly that I did to help make sure that the handheld looked as stable as possible in the final edit, and it actually worked considerably well. One thing that I did is I shot a lot in slow motion, because sometimes slow motion can look extremely cinematic and really cool, but it also can hide the shakiness of your hand. I slid back a little bit further than I typically would because I knew I was probably going to use post-stabilization. And if you know anything about post-stabilization, it zooms in as it stabilizes. So I was like, oh man, I need to stand back some because I want to account for that zoom that's going to happen in post. And I also held my camera a specific way. I put my hand on the body of the camera and my hand under the lens of the camera. This ensured that I had 2 good points of contact on the camera to make it as stable as possible while filming. So in the end, after so many mistakes and feeling absolutely horrible after this shoot, I was able to fix a lot of things in editing. My third and final tip is to use editing techniques to fix your mistakes. And lucky for you, if you ever experience anything like what I experienced on this dreadful day, I have made an entire video on how to fix your mistakes in editing. I will put the link in the description, or you could just click the card that will appear at the top of the screen. So be sure to check that out. And even though this video I made is Final Cut Pro specific, it is bound to help you realize what mistakes you need to fix in your footage, regardless of what software you use. And if you're dying for me to make a tutorial on your editing software, just comment down below and I'll be sure to get on that. Please subscribe if you're new so you will not miss the next horror story I'm going to tell. Also, there's just so much we do, and there's so much that we're going to do on this channel. You don't want to miss any of it. Also, make sure you turn on that notification bell so you really don't miss it, and follow me on Instagram at Future Filmmakers because I'm always posting updates of what's happening next there. I guess that's it. And I haven't even told you guys what happened at my second wedding. It's a whole nother horror story. It's so much better than this video. If you like this video, smash the like button because I want to make the video of what happened at my second wedding. And oh my gosh, it's such a better video. I don't know. If you like this video, you gotta subscribe because that video is gonna be insane. It's gonna be so good. Also, check out my horror story part 3. Before giving up, watch this video. That's such an incredible video. Remember to always keep creating because it's our turn to make it happen. I think I like
like the